that we can't have housing in our particular area, that places like Cambridgeshire, that East Sussex can't be dealing with additional housing, is simply wrong and doesn't help fulfil the potential of those areas. I'm more than happy for her to intervene on me if she wants.
I hardly think that it's appropriate for me to talk about East Sussex, but East Sussex already has agreed to an increase in the housing. It might not be what the central government wants, but there is an increase in housing in East Sussex.
Ian Wright.
But that's the fundamental point, is it not, Mr Cummings? You know, the targets have been set so low. The idea of 30 additional houses in a county or whatever is just simply unacceptable, given the level of economic potential and development that could be there. And so what I would hope, Mr Cummings, in conclusion, because I realise that I'm out of time, is that I pledge that I write to every honourable member here.
We now move on to the closure of First Solutions Money Transfer Company. Mr George Galloway.
Mr Cummings, the collapse of First Solutions hit the community of the East End of London and elsewhere with all the force of a flood. It has devastated some of the poorest people in England, some of the lowest paid workers, some of the poorest housed people in England, those that live in the chilly shade of the hedge fund operators in the richest square mile on the earth in the City of London, and the gleaming spires of capitalism at Canary Wharf. These people whose sweat off their brow, in their savings of often small amounts to you and I, Mr Cummings, but big amounts to them, and indeed bigger amounts to those in Bangladesh, the poorest country in the world, to whom this money was destined to be sent. Now, no one will know the full scale of the losses until the Insolvency Service has concluded its forensic examination of the accounts. But at the moment, the directors are claiming £1.7 million is owed to 2,000 creditors. And of course, these figures do not begin to paint the human picture of the suffering. One man from Manchester has lost £70,000, his life's savings, and brought him to the edge of despair. Another, he's lost the money he'd saved for retirement back in Bangladesh. In yet another case, money saved by a man over a whole year to buy essential medical treatment for his brother has gone missing. The tale of misery is represented amongst the strangers here amongst us, some of the poorest and some of the oldest victims of this collapse. I was first alerted to the problems in this company almost 4 weeks ago. Agents working for First Solution from the home counties contacted me and said that money they had taken in over the previous 2 months for transfer to Bangladesh, some £150,000, had for the most part failed to get there. They said a meeting had been held between more than 40 of them and the directors of First Solution in the middle of May, after money had stopped getting to Bangladesh. They'd been told by the directors there were problems, but that they'd be soon put right. More than 1 month later, the situation had simply got worse, as the money owed to clients had grown and grown. As the evidence mounted that there were problems within this company, and that good money was being paid in after bad in large quantities daily, my response was to seek the assistance of the authorities to find out what had got wrong. I contacted the Financial Services Authority, but to my amazement was told that this particular financial service fell outside their remit and that I'd have to approach trading standards officers. So we contacted Trading Standards at Tower Hamlets Council with the evidence that had been presented to me, but they said, "This is too big for us. You must contact the police." So I sent a personal letter straight away to the borough commander in Tower Hamlets, again outlining the evidence of the very serious problems in the company, of the suspicions, now widespread, Mr Cumming, of wrongdoing, and asking them to engage whatever agencies in the police were responsible to investigate the company. Commander Saville referred the matter to the local fraud office, and an officer then contacted my office to say he was preparing a report to send to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, as they were in fact, he said, the regulating body. This was some 3 days before the company finally ceased trading. under mounting media pressure, and here I commend the excellent investigative reporting of Ted Jury of the East London Advertiser, the company seems to have engaged with its accountants and lawyers, and I believe the directors were advised that they were almost certainly trading as an insolvent company, a potentially criminal offence. They were advised by their lawyer to instruct their agents to stop taking business. But to this day, many of those agents claim they never received any such instruction. Early in the morning of the 21st of June, the directors posted a notice on their office in the London Muslim Centre saying their office was closed until further notice. Now, Mr. Cumming, this was no tin pot business. It was a business that had grown from £4 million turnover in its first year of operation, 2004, to an estimated £87 million turnover in 2006-07. This growth was achieved in a number of ways. Firstly, it offered higher exchange rates for lower fees with a quicker service to more outlying areas of Bangladesh than its rivals, and particularly than the banks, which are subject to financial security regulation. Secondly, it was assiduously and ruthlessly promoted as a community service, with its headquarters located in the London Muslim Centre next to the East London Mosque on Bangladeshi TV station Channel S. Not coincidentally, the driving force behind First Solution, which also includes real estate investment, travel and other services, Dr. Fazal Mahmood, was also the managing director of Channel S until the day before First Solution collapsed. I have asked Ofcom, and I demand it again here through you, Mr. Cumming, to investigate whether there was a breach of the broadcasting code as a result of this close relationship and the apparent conflicts of interest. But so far, Ofcom have not agreed to this inquiry. I want to know, were the adverts that ran interminably on Channel S for First Solution, even though they shared this Dr. Fazal Mahmood's services, whether these were properly billed and paid for, whether this was really commercial advertising, or whether it was a relentless drive to get the TV station's audience to do their business with First Solution. And Ofcom have a duty to the population of East London in that regard. You may be surprised to know, I was, Mr. Cumming, that Dr. Fazal Mahmood was convicted in 2004 on 2 counts of the criminal offence of breaching Section 84 of the Immigration and Asylum Act 1999. A convicted criminal in 2004 is allowed to build up an £87 million business by 3 years later because of the failure to have a fit and proper person regulation in place for people operating money transfer businesses. Upon the collapse of the company, and this one is even more interesting, the directors of First Solution appointed an insolvency firm, Panos Eliadis Franklin & Co., to register creditors, set up a creditors meeting and advise on liquidation. Panos Eliadis himself fronted up and continues to front up this operation. Mr. Eliadis, however, was excluded from membership of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales in the year 2000, and in a legal dispute over debts with the boxer Lennox Lewis in New York Court and the High Court in London, ruled that Mr. Eliadis had comprehensively lied in order to avoid paying up the debts he was alleged to owe. His partner, Mr. Franklin, is qualified as an insolvency practitioner, although subject to restriction and monitoring by Insolvency Practitioners Association. In a word, he's in special measures. One cannot help wondering, Mr. Cummings, why amongst all the insolvency firms operating in London, many of whom have been bombarding me with offers of help, the directors of First Solution managed to choose one like that. Now, there's an important point here. There's a great deal of anger in the Bangladeshi community in the East End and in Bangladesh itself about what has happened. There is a feeling, which I share, that it should have been impossible for a money transfer company, which after all merely takes money from Peter and promises to transfer it to Paul, how it could possibly lose money. There's been much rumour and speculation in the East End that something criminal must have happened to that money. No?
The Honourable Member give way?
Of course.
I thank the Honourable Member. He's rightly identified some of the gaps in the regulatory framework. A constituent of mine in Newcastle-under-Lyme in Staffordshire has also lost £70,000, and this was in late June. And he tells me that he spoke to one of the directors, Shah Mohammed Abdul Hadi, before remitting the money and was assured that everything was fine. Now, if it looks like a fraud, sounds like a fraud, and quacks like a fraud, it is a fraud, and clearly that is a matter for the police.
Quite so, Mr. Cumming, and I'll come to precisely those points in just a minute. Now, of course, the investigation will continue, but any investigation must carry credibility with the community that's lost their money, Mr. Cummings. Normally, with the collapse of a company, the investigation would be undertaken in the first place by the insolvency practitioners engaged by the directors, confirmed at a creditors' meeting. I want to say here now, there is no way that Panos, Eliades, Franklin and Co., with their colourful history, could possibly have the credibility to conduct such an investigation. I'm very pleased that as a result of the huge political pressure that's been brought to bear in this case, members of the Limehouse Financial Investigation Team of the Metropolitan Police executed search warrants on the headquarters of First Solution 1 week after the collapse. I would have much preferred this action to have been taken earlier. I would remind them, Mr. Cummings, I would remind the Minister that I alerted the police to the possibility of fraud 3 days before the company collapsed. However, I have been assured by the police that they have secured all the electronic records they believe they need to conduct a proper investigation, and I hope that that's the case. As far as the 4 directors of the company, or perhaps it's 3 as one seems to have resigned, they've been putting out a robust defence of their honesty. Now, I'm no expert on the international financial markets, but there's a problem with their explanation. The delays they hold responsible for the difficulties the business faced would in fact have benefited the company, as the long-term exchange rate was for the Bangladeshi currency to fall against the pound. This is what they've claimed, Mr. Cumming, that people were not transferring the money from the agent to them quickly enough, and in the delay there had been a loss in the currency market. But in fact the taka has been falling like a stone compared to the pound, and in just 3 years its value has fallen by a half. So any delays would actually have benefited the profitability of the company, not suppressed it. The director's account of events does not have credibility at the moment. Moreover, there are an increasing number of people coming to me who are concerned that investments they have made in property in Bangladesh through First Solution have again not reached the other end. This includes Britannia Property Services Limited, trading as Britannia Samana, which has amongst its directors both the chair of Channel S, the man now known, he changed his name, as Mohammed Mahi Ferdosh, and Dr. Fazal Mahmood. Now, the questions that must be answered are these, Mr. Cumming. When were the losses that brought the company down first incurred? When was the informal overdraft facility with South East Bank arranged, and how much for? What role did the informal overdraft facility from South East Bank play in covering up the losses? Why was the overdraft facility withdrawn? When would a reasonable person conclude the company had become insolvent? Is there any evidence of money paid in for transfer being diverted to other uses, including speculation? Did Mohammed Mossadegh Ali Falu, previously an MP in the Bangladesh Parliament, now in jail in Bangladesh, facing money laundering charges, use First Solution to launder money from Bangladesh to the UK, paying higher than official rates in taka? Was First Solution depositing UK sterling into Falu-nominated UK accounts, and was Falu supplying takas in Bangladesh? Was the drying up of taka through money laundering as a result of the anti-corruption drive by the caretaker government in Bangladesh the reason why First Solution made losses? Were there any significant payments out of First Solution Money Transfer Limited client accounts to unsecured creditors, including any of the directors of First Solution or other companies of which they are directors, at any time in the last 3 months before the company stopped trading and after the withdrawal of the informal overdraft facility? Whatever the outcome of this investigation, I will.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend.
Margaret
I'm sure in that very comprehensive investigation expose that he's outlining, one of the questions must also be to the many millions of members of the Bangladeshi community, both in his constituency and mine in Luton, and indeed across the UK, what immediate relief can be offered and what can be done to prevent this happening again, but what immediate relief can be offered. And I'm sure he will want to join with me in thanking Baroness Paola Udin and the Sir William Beveridge Foundation, who are doing their utmost to see whether some of those real crisis cases, and there are many people both in this audience and twice as many downstairs and out within the community, who have seen their hard-won life savings vanish in an instant, and we have collectively a duty to help and support them.
Quite so, Mr Cumming. In fact, we are not only demanding crisis cases, as I'll come to in just 1 minute, we are demanding that everyone who's lost money gets it back. Whatever the outcome of this investigation, it's important that the burgeoning area of financial services needs more regulation. Money transfer companies receive a licence from HMRC, which is charged with monitoring money laundering. However, there is no regulation of these companies to monitor them for financial security. This seems to me a big hole in the regulatory regime. DFID, of course, was amongst those agencies after 9/11 which pushed the informal networks that previously were used to transfer money to countries like Bangladesh, pushed them out of the picture and insisted that a move to a more formal network take place. £7.5 million was paid to the State Bank of Bangladesh to encourage the Bangladeshi authorities to go down this road at their end. And this is the context in which we saw the emergence and the extremely rapid growth of First Solution. But without proper regulation, the danger of a First Solution collapse was ever present. The government has a responsibility, therefore, having pushed people into this sector, knowing that it was not regulated, for encouraging this process of money transfer. I continue to maintain that the government has an obligation to help the people who have lost money in this collapse. Now, I think I'm running out of time, if she'll forgive me. I want the Minister to have time to reply. Now, I had a meeting with the Minister, who was most gracious, I must say, and she rejected direct help on the grounds that this would encourage moral hazard. But if it is the government who have encouraged this system, which failed to protect the customer, then I believe it's the government who has the moral obligation to help. As for regulation, I believe this needs to be looked at as a matter of urgency and proposals brought forward, and I'm glad that the Minister said this is to be done. But I stress there needs to be a fit and proper test for directors in that regulation. What the Minister has agreed to is government assistance in establishing a fund to raise money to pay back the many poor people who have lost money. It is early days, and I understand that the agents who have lost so much business and standing in the community are themselves trying to organise a rescue package. I myself have already begun writing to the heads of major city institutions to ask them to contribute to the relief fund that the Minister and I discussed at our meeting. If government ministers led by the Prime Minister were to add their voice to that call and to lead the House by example, I believe we could raise the necessary funds swiftly to pay everybody back. I purposely described where most of the victims live, Mr Cumming. They live in the cold shadow of some of the richest companies, banks, finance houses in the entire world. If the government puts their back into it, if the government tugs at the consciences of the hedge fund managers and the private equity speculators and the city slickers that got £8.8 billion in Christmas bonuses just 6 months ago, if the government puts the arm on some of the richest people in England to help some of the poorest people in England who are the victims of this crash, something can be rescued from the ashes, and I look forward to hearing what the Minister has in mind in that regard.
I'm grateful, Mr Cummings, for your chairmanship, and may I start by congratulating the honourable member on securing this afternoon's debate, and I'm sure it would be unladylike for me to add something like why